I've invited my children into shared governance. This is money to be used for generations. My kids have agreed to be disinherited. They're not on the beneficiary forms. How are they going to learn if we don't talk about it? The kids are getting taught by someone. Who do you want it to be? Successful people are focused on other people and seek to add value. Having enough money to live on is not a finish line for me.
Imagine building $1 billion business, selling it, and still feeling like something was missing. That's where today's guest found himself until a year-long RV trip with his family completely changed how he sees wealth, success, and legacy. I'm Linda Vo, and this is Inspired by Success. In this episode, we'll explore why financial success alone isn't enough, how to build wealth that actually strengthens family instead of dividing it, and the thinking patterns that quietly sabotage even the most successful entrepreneurs. Let's welcome multi-generational wealth builder and author John Knowlton to the show. Welcome, John.
Oh, Linda, I'm so happy to be here and to share with your guests.
So most people often dream of building $1 billion business. You did it and then walked away. What made you realize financial success wasn't the real measure of legacy?
Well, I was only 52 or 51. Any case, whatever it was, I still had a lot of gas in the tank. And frankly, while money motivates me, to me, money is a way of measuring value exchange. In other words, when you provide value to people in a free market and they give you value back, that feels awesome. So the money is good for my psyche and my psychology, right, to help me feel good about giving good value. But it really doesn't make me get up in the morning. Instead, it's really the value exchange, the ability to help someone solve a problem, get unstuck, see a better future, or something like that. And that's what really makes me get excited. And so after that year-long sabbatical where we did do a big RV trip with my family, I started to coach Christian CEOs. So I lead 2 different groups of peer advisory groups of Christian CEOs in Michigan and the USA. It's a great experience. I get to participate in their businesses, but not be responsible. So it's just a really great opportunity.
That's interesting. I'm going to talk about the wealth building strategies. Before we get to that, though, you took your family on a year-long trip after selling your business. What shifted for you during that time?
Yeah, well, I realized that it was really important to stay engaged with people. Having enough money to live on is not a finish line for me. I realized that everybody needs purpose. That's something to do. And meaning really involves stewarding something, being steward for an organization or other people. Some people take care of grass or animals or gardens. A lot of people do that. So all of that is around meaning. It's, in other words, pouring yourself out for someone, some other living thing. And then the last thing is social contact. And we all need that. And work provides all 3 of those. Somebody's expecting you to show up to work. You're adding value to other people. And then you're, of course, even very minor things. You hold the door open for someone and they say, thank you. They acknowledge your presence, your gift to them. And if in the absence of work, you've got to find something to provide those meaning, purpose, and social contact. And if you need to go find those things, you may as well work. So that's what I discovered in a year off from work.
Yeah, I've heard that, it's a lot of successful entrepreneurs that have sold their business, they always get itchy afterwards because you're used to building, contributing, and the purpose part as well, making an impact. I think that fuels a lot of people and entrepreneurs. And I hear stories how when people retire, if they don't do anything and they just relax, they kind of like wither away in a way. So life is short, so make the most out of it. In terms of the wealth thing that we mentioned it before about, just say most of the audience that are listening are entrepreneurs and CEOs, and they're interested in building wealth, and some may have kids as well. But I wanted to get into the how part of structures, and you mentioned that too, but that's not just one element because there's also psychology in there too. So first of all, what are your recommendations in terms of building generational wealth and just managing it for our children or passing it along to charities? There's a book that I haven't yet read, but it's Die with Zero, apparently,
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? And how can we make sure that we build a proper structure so that we can pass it down to our kids without having to give them, because in Kabbalah, I'm learning Kabbalah too, that don't give them bread of shame, which is giving something without them feeling like they've earned it. Do you know what I mean? Because then they can't appreciate it as well, because that's another thing. And then you can destroy the wealth if they don't have that mindset already, like prepared for that wealth. And then it's obviously going to go in minutes, like just like when people win the lottery and they're not used to all that wealth, then it's gone within a year or two. So
Yeah.
can we get to the practical, what your advice on the trusts, and then, the psychology aspect of it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Linda, you do a great job of talking about some of the mechanics of building wealth. I know that's true from your podcast. And most of the listeners, and really most people who accumulate some wealth, they do it really two or three ways. One is they own a company and provide tons of value into the world, or they're an executive at a big company and maybe they get some stock options, equity stakes, what have you. Or they're really good investors, maybe in real estate or good with public markets, and ultimately perhaps they become angel investors, venture capitalists, what have you. But really, those are the main ways that people build wealth over time. There are skills and traits involved that allow you to build wealth. You're hardworking, you value productivity, you seek to benefit other people around you. Really, there's a lot of sort of negative energy in the current culture right now that makes it seem like people get wealthy by taking from other people. But we know that's not true. You get wealthy by providing a surplus of value, not by extracting value. That extraction doesn't work. And so there's these qualities in people that do accumulate and generate wealth that are critical to building it and to maintaining it. And so one of the challenges that we have is our kids tend to grow up with a pretty good lifestyle. My kids don't know much about having to save money for food, or they don't know anything about that. They've never experienced lack. And so how do we instill in them those same traits that allowed us to build wealth, the hard work, the grit, intention to serve other people, to provide value? And that's a real problem, because the way that traditional estate planning works is this is my money, or my wife and my money, and we're going to manage it and spend it the way we think is right until we die. And then it'll be yours. And there's a lot of work that people do around trying to codify their value system in trust documents and in these legal frameworks, so that when their kids receive this big chunk of money, then there's all these rules. Rules around how it can be spent and when it can be spent and what it could be used for. And I think that is way too late. In other words, you might have documented your value system, but you haven't necessarily passed on those skills and traits that allowed you to build wealth. And so I see that as a sort of a failed system. And we've got lots of examples throughout history of people building big piles of wealth and then their heirs just squandering it quickly. When I was doing wealth management as a practitioner 20 years ago, I had one client who died in a car accident. So it was unexpected. And his son was in his early 20s. And he inherited $400,000 US, so maybe $800,000 in today's money. And the money was gone in just a couple of months. I mean, he was calling every week for $10,000, $40,000, $60,000. Oh, yeah. He was a fool.
Was he a gambler or on drugs?
He was on drugs, and he had friends on drugs. Yeah.
Oh.
Yep, you bet.
Okay.
But he didn't have the skills, the traits that his dad had. That wasn't a huge lot of money, right? But it was significant. It should have been cared for and stewarded and could have been used for good. Instead, it was used for debauchery and vile things. And so what I want to do for myself, and am doing for myself and my family, and want other people to experience, is what I consider a better alternative is something that I call shared governance. So instead of John and Julie's money until we die, and then it's kids' money, I've invited my children, adult children, into shared governance. And so we've all agreed this is our money, but it's not just our money. This is our money to be used as a force for good for generations. money as a force for good for generations. And my kids have agreed to be disinherited. They're not on the beneficiary forms. The Knowlton Family Trust is. Instead, they have been invited into managing the money with us together. And so I'm happy to walk through the process that we've gone through with you. I know I've been talking for a little while. Linda, you have good questions, I know.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested because this is something that most people do think this is the parents worked hard and they save it. And then when they die, they put it in a will and that's it. And they have some conditions. But I'm fascinated. This is a different like a different way of thinking as well, to bring the kids into it and to prepare them. So how do you manage it together? Do you sit down and say, look, this is what we're doing? Are we going to have the expenses for your everyday? Like if you have education expenses or buy a house, it's kind of like giving them something that they haven't worked for. And like, how can they contribute to it together and manage the wealth together so that it grows and it lasts for generations? Because
exactly. My kids are in their 20s still. So I don't know if this works. Okay. So but I believe it is. And what we did was had a family meeting at a holiday and I warned them, I didn't spring it on them. I want to talk about this concept with you. One of my kids said, is there going to be a PowerPoint? And my wife, Julie, says, your dad. Of course there's going to be a PowerPoint. But what I did what we did, my wife and I, Julie, what we did was we took my kids on a historical journey from before we met. What did we do for work? How did we think about money? What did we do in the hard times? Here, 2008, the global financial crisis. Dad was pulling money out of his retirement accounts to make payroll, those kinds of stories. And here's how a friend came through when we weren't expecting it. And here's how we were paying our tithe, even when it was so hard. And, just telling the story year by year, pictures with them, their little kids in diapers and, in their little school and all this kind of stuff. And we just walked them up all the way through. I prepared a graph and I showed them, here's my income. Here's the year that I was almost on welfare. And then, whoa, look at the hockey stick. When we're faithful with our money and we serve people. So I'm telling them the story of how do you grow wealth through work and value production and creation. And then said, look, I told them the story. We can manage it until we die, and then you can get a bunch of money that you don't really know what to do with. Or we can begin to work on this together. So we invited them in and they agreed. And so our adult kids have formed or joined our family board. And I took them through extensive process of coming up with a shared mission, vision, and values for our family. So these are the terms by which we're going to make decisions together. Mission, vision, and values. Mission is what we're about as a family. Vision is how we think the world will be different if we accomplish our mission. And values are the ways that we intend to work together and how we're going to show up in the world. And by the way, I think values should be hierarchical and action-oriented. So let's just say in a business or any organization that has values, sometimes the values might come in conflict and your people have to know which one wins. So quick example, imagine you have a service business and one of your values is we are driven to deliver results for customers. And another value is we care about our people. Susie gets sick and can't get the job done for the customer. Well, which value wins? Is it we care about our people or is it that we deliver for the customer? And so you have to have a way for people to know and arbitrate which of those values wins. So in any case, we've done this whole process. It was extensive, a bunch of meetings. We do them on Zoom. We figured out that 75 minutes is as long as our family can hang together. But we've had multiple meetings like this. And what we found by going through these kinds of decision-making processes together is that we trust each other more. We know about each other's heart more. We know how each other wants to show up in the world. And so even that beginning process of establishing family mission, vision, and values was just a super powerful tool to bond our family together. We're not exactly peers, but we're functioning more like peers and as people who know each other as human beings in the world. It's super cool.
I'm curious to know, let's take it back about building your company before you sold it. I should have asked this earlier, but
Okay.
same thing what you're doing now with the wealth that you've built. How did you build it and scale it to where it was before selling it? Did you do a lot of investments, or you just happened to have the right buyer? Can you take us back to that journey as well?
Sure.
And how
Yeah.
long did it
So
take you before you decided to sell?
I stumbled into a career in wealth management. Literally, I was a full-time pastor, needed to leave that role, and was applying for all kinds of jobs. This is in the 90s, Linda. All kind of jobs that should have been open to me, and nobody would give me a job. I'm back to painting apartments to put food on a table. And then my mom sent me a recruiting videotape, a VHS tape that you'd slide into the old machine there. And it was from a wealth management company. And she encouraged me to apply, and I did. And they rejected me too. But the process got me interested in the field. And so I sought out another firm. Anyways, started in the career, smiling and dialing the phone, calling people after dinner, trying to get them to invest their money with me or hire me to do a financial plan for them or something like this. Ultimately, 6 years into my career, I bought out a partner, an older woman who was getting ready. I was basically her retirement plan. And I realized you can get clients one at a time, or you can buy them in chunks. And I liked buying them in chunks. And so that first experience caused me to really figure out how to do mergers and acquisitions. And so I spent the next 11 years with trial and error. How do I reach out? How do I still building the business one client at a time, bringing in some partners, building out staff, but always thinking my biggest opportunities, mergers and acquisitions, my biggest opportunities, mergers and acquisitions. And we got lucky here and there. We bought a few, some
Is this
small
buying
ones.
businesses though?
What's
Buying
that?
acquisitions with businesses?
Other wealth management businesses.
Oh, wealth management, buying wealth management. Okay.
Yeah. I spent 10 or 11 years doing small acquisitions and really learning how to do a good job, how to approach other financial advisors, how to talk to them about how we'll take care of their clients and how to structure deals and all this, a bunch of small deals. And then in 2015, my partner and I set a goal of being at $1 billion. And we didn't know how to run a business that big. And so we kind of drew straws, and I was the one who was going to have to go get a management degree, a master's in MBA management degree. But right before I was to start that program, someone told me, John, you don't need that. You can read your books yourself. What you need is a group of other CEOs who are also scaling. And so I found a peer advisory group and joined it. And the discipline of telling them what my goals were, my peers, and then 1 month later having to come back and tell them, did I do what I said I was going to do or not? That discipline got me super focused. And I realized that while we had seen mergers and acquisitions as our key opportunity, that it was getting the least amount of my time. I did a brutal 2-week time study in 15-minute increments. So I had over 400 data points. And then I had to synthesize, and I realized there's 4 buckets where I'm spending my time, and M&A was getting the smallest amount of my time. So that process allowed us to create 2 new positions. One is we needed another service advisor to take some of my client responsibilities, and then a dedicated admin solely focused on the mergers and acquisitions. And so I hired this woman. I had to keep her busy. I had to give her something to do. And so we developed a pretty good process on how to approach and ultimately entice other financial advisors to sell their businesses to us, that we would be the best option for them. And then in 2018, we completed a key merger. There was another firm that had a really great client service model and investment management capabilities. And then we had the good M&A capabilities, and we put those two together, and the thing just took off like a rocket ship.
And you sold it at the right time.
Well, that was in 2018. We'd hit my business goal. and my family needed some extra attention from dad. And so at that time we had 13 partners. So I sold to the other partners, and we had contemplated the entry and exit of owners and partners. And so I just took that opportunity at the very end of 2020. And then 2021 was that sabbatical year. So it was a process of setting a goal, being at $1 billion, and working the process of figuring out over time, trial and error for more than a decade, how do we get good at mergers and acquisitions? Yeah, ultimately, that key merger was really awesome. And that firm has continued to grow. They're about 3 times as big as they were in 2020. So they're just rocking and rolling, and it's great.
Do you regret not waiting, or are you still getting a
No,
percentage?
I don't regret it. It was a good time for me. The firm has continued to succeed, and I'm doing stuff that's really valuable that I wouldn't have time to do if I was working there full time.
Wow, that's really inspiring. And you've worked with families who have everything but unity, because sometimes when there's a lot of wealth involved, sometimes I've had other guests that speak about this, but when you do, the entrepreneur, the business owner does so well in business, but then family unity isn't there. So what is your thoughts on that, and what flips well from dividing a family to bringing it closer? Because sometimes when there's a lot of wealth involved and there's the wills involved, it creates a lot of division. So what are your thoughts on that, and how can we bring unity to the family when there is a lot of wealth involved?
Yeah, well, you've seen these cases where someone dies and then the kids all fight and they sue each other and they hate each other and they never, oh my gosh, what a terrible, wouldn't it be better to die poor, but your family loves each other? My goodness. But I think we can do both. I think we can generate wealth and have an awesome family. And there are great examples of that. In the United States, the Ford family, Henry Ford invented the movable assembly line and the automobile factory 120 years ago or something like that. And his family's in the 5th generation, still leading as chairman of the board of the Ford Motor Company. And one of Henry Ford's great granddaughters is head of a professional football team called the Detroit Lions. It's been my team ever since I've been a little boy, and they've never won a Super Bowl. But since she took over in 2020, they won 14 games and lost 3 last year. And so there's been a great turnaround. Any case, that's a great example of a family that's kept their wealth together and they continue to provide great value. So the shared governance, I think, is key. So whereas the other model where we keep it secret and the kids just find out what's there at the end when we die, that's like building a really fast sports car and then not teaching your kids to drive, but leaving the keys in an envelope for after you die. It's a recipe for disaster. And so instead, I'm inviting my kids in. Let's talk about what kind of car should we have? Should we have an RV? Should we have an SUV? Should we have a sports car? Maybe we need more than one kind of car. And let's all learn to drive together and let's give each other feedback and stuff. And so the mechanism for that is our family board. And the board meets on a quarterly basis or as needed. I've got my daughter as the chair of the Philanthropy committee. And so the board decided, okay, this year we're going to give away this much money. So we put a chunk of money into a donor advised fund. That's just a charitable fund that gets it out of we're no longer taxed on that money, but it's just waiting to be distributed. And so she runs the Philanthropy committee, and she, with our input, came up with kind of a request form so that anybody in the family can say, hey, I want to give $5,000 to this charity. And then we ask, how does this charity's work align with our family's mission, vision, and values? And so we have to write it out and type it up and be thoughtful about it. We have preference for entities that people in our family donate their time to as well. And so I don't know, it's 9 or 10 or 12 questions. And simply the process of filling that out causes people to learn to think about how and where should we give our money away. And one of the things that we ask is, how does this charity measure its effectiveness? Boy, it's been really interesting. I've been challenged by one of my friends who said, John, you're so data driven in all of your other work. How do you know that the charities you give money to are using the money well? And I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I got on the phone and started calling executive directors and started asking them, how do you measure your effectiveness? And Linda, it's amazing how many of them, A, didn't know what the heck I was talking about, or B, it was, well, how much money do we bring in? It was really not outcome based at all. I had to cut some off. But anyways, so I learned that through my own research and being challenged by my friends. And so we've baked that into our philanthropy request form. So what's happening? My kids are learning, A, we give money away. B, there's a process to it, and it should align with our family's values that we agreed on, and we should measure the effectiveness of our philanthropic giving. They're learning to drive. They're learning how about money. They're learning about being good stewards. And we're doing it together. And it's building agreement, because so far we've never had anything except a unanimous vote. Someone goes through that work and they've done the effort, but we're getting feedback from each other, asking questions about it and this kind of stuff. And so this process of working together, Linda, is building trust and affinity. I think we like each other more, or we know more about how each other thinks. And so we're able to like each other more or love each other more because we know more.
What's the secret weapon behind every top CEO and entrepreneur? A game-changing executive assistant. Hermesi gives you access to elite EAs who supercharge your productivity. From payroll and admin to social media and customer support, they handle it all so you can focus on growth and big picture decisions. These aren't your average assistants. They're expertly trained, thoroughly screened, and equipped with the latest AI tools to work smarter and faster. Ready to delegate and dominate? Get 15% off your first 2 months with code INSPIRE15. Don't wait. Visit Hermesi, that's HERMESSI.com, and take back your time today. Okay, so that's fascinating too. But just so for the entrepreneurs who aren't at that stage of being able to, think about all the donations to the charities, but they still have that wealth and they're building that wealth, how can families come together to talk about growing that wealth and in order to be able to give that to the charities in the long run? What if we're not at that stage yet as as an entrepreneur, but you want to grow that? Do you recommend sitting together with the family and talking about wealth growing strategies, wealth, building strategies before, just say an entrepreneur hasn't got to that stage yet?
Sure.
But we want to teach your kids how to be smart with their money and grow their money instead of
I guess I just want to challenge that just a little bit. For my family, giving is something we do regardless of our financial condition. And so our kids, when they would get allowance, they would pay a tithe. They paid 10% of their whatever they get, birthday money, allowance money, whatever, even little kids. So that's a value we have. And so we taught that from as soon as they could hold money, they learned they were giving money away. So any case, so you can teach the values, even in the dollar amount is very small. But to your question about sort of teaching the values around values and skills and traits that lead to wealth accumulation, my poor kids. So Julie and I have insisted on having a family meal together virtually every day. And sometimes if we had an evening event, a recital or a school concert or something like this, we might eat dinner at 4:30. It's way too early to eat food. But the purpose of dinner isn't to eat food. The purpose of dinner is to communicate and to transmit values. And so as we sat around the dinner table every night, we would talk about our days. What did you do? Tell me about your school. Who did you talk to? What about Mrs. Smith? Okay, great. Dad, what did you do? Everybody gets a chance to talk about their day. And I would talk about clients that I worked with and how did I help solve someone's problem? Here's a deal I'm working on. The lawyers are messing it up and I wish they would leave me alone or whatever. So every day, Linda, we're talking about what we do, how we interact in the world, how do we show up for other people? And that is transmitting values. It's implicit. So I'm not saying our values are A, B, and C, but this is how we work in the world. And then my kids, I would drag them to closings. One son, I'm like, you're my bag man. You got to carry this briefcase with the check in it. Not buying this business. There's a check for $80,000 in there. Hold on to the suitcase. Or, the
Wow.
briefcase,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we would go to the closing and, okay, we sign the papers. Samuel, you got the money? He opens the briefcase. Here, Dad. Yeah.
Wow.
Take your kids with you. Absolutely. Especially if you own the business, nobody can tell you not to. Oh my gosh, that is so rich. They see how you interact with your employees. They see how you interact with your vendors, your partners, your peers, your customers. Oh, so much more is caught than taught, Linda.
That's powerful. And communicating, because most families, they don't share the business side of things at the dinner table, So that's definitely an interesting concept and something that they can learn
How
as
are they going to
well.
learn?
Yeah.
If we don't talk about it, they're going to learn from TikTok? Come on. The kids are getting taught by someone. Who do you want it to be?
Yeah, that's true. You've worked as a jail chaplain, I believe, and you saw destructive thinking patterns firsthand. How do these same traps show up in successful families?
Ooh, well, the same ones don't show up, at least not to the same degree. But yeah, I've been a jail chaplain in a few different settings. I'll tell you, the thing that leads people to jail or prison is primarily a focus on themselves. A couple quick stories. This is all in Chicago, Illinois, third biggest city in the United States. I was a jail chaplain. One guy was in jail. He was driving trucks, big trucks on the highway, and he was using crack cocaine to stay awake. And he could not understand why in the world they would arrest him for using what he needed to do his job. He was not thinking about the thousands and thousands of people driving their automobiles on the highways around Chicago. He was only thinking about him getting his miles in so he could get his money. Selfish thinking. Another guy in Chicago, same jail. This guy's walking around in the hallways. He's an inmate, so he's wearing an orange jumpsuit, but he's out of his cell. He's sweeping the floors and he's cleaning up the trash bags and things like this. And he had this great personality, magnetic smile. And I'm like, hey, man, what are you doing? Why are you in here, man? And he said, on the outside, everybody has a job and I want to be different. So I didn't have a job. And then, of course, he needed money to live, so he would steal, and then he got arrested and put in jail. But in here, nobody has a job, and I want to be different. So, I became a trustee. It's called a trustee. There's a few inmates that have favor with the warden and whatnot, and they're allowed out to do jobs and whatnot. So his thinking was all about himself. I want to be different. He wasn't thinking about how do I add value to my community. No, it's how do I be special and different from you? So selfish thinking leads us to jail. And the worst case, right? There's other selfish thinking that doesn't quite get you there, but nobody wants to work with selfish people. Nobody wants to be married to selfish people. Third example, and then I'm done. Another guy from Chicago grew up in the same kind of households as those other two guys. Dad died an alcoholic, moving from house to house. Mom couldn't take care of him. She died an alcoholic. Oldest sister's raising him. She's an alcoholic. One teacher, 5th grade, sees this guy who's got some aptitude. He's getting things quick in class. And she says, you have ability to succeed. And so he finds out in high school that he's good at science. And he just is willing to work hard enough to get into college. And he does well enough in college that he decides to be a doctor. And he goes into medical school and becomes an anesthesiologist. Anesthesiologists use drugs to put people to sleep, to control the drugs so that people can have surgeries. So this guy who had been raised in a family that was completely under the control of substances turned his career into controlling substances to help people. He was not selfish, became a doctor and a partner in a huge practice. You see, the difference is, am I focused on me or am I focused on other people? Successful people are focused on other people and seek to add value.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. Yeah, the way that people think, it's the mindset.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know about business application as well. So some people have a fear that involving kids in wealth planning will kill their drive, especially kids' drives. How do you balance the preparation? Because you mentioned that teaching your kids and bringing them everywhere. How do you balance the preparation with motivation?
I mean, there's different drivers of motivation, but the worst kind of drivers are extrinsic, right? They're outside of us. The best ones are the ones that are internal. And it's really about shaping our kids to be the type of people who will work hard and find value in grit and determination and seeking to overcome obstacles and things like that. And so I really think it's not about money. It's not about the money. They can live in a nice house and have drive and grit. And if money is the reason that they work or don't work, then we sort of didn't transfer good values in the first place. And so it's really, I really think it starts at the dinner table, Linda. And I don't want to be reductionistic, but our kids have to be taught and they have to catch what kind of people we are and what kind of people we want to be in the world. And they'll catch that. They will learn that. And money, lots of money or lack of money, doesn't change that if that's an intrinsic reality for them. And so it's really about shaping them and exposing them to experiences that craft them into the kind of people who care. So I still serve as a pastor, and my youngest kid, I've taken him with me to visit people who are sick and shut in, take them communion, go and be in their house. We were visiting a woman who was near death one time, and she just needed to talk to somebody. And so we sat there for over an hour in her smelly, messy house and listened to her talk. And on the way home, I said, "Hey, man, the biggest part of ministry is listening." And so he's learning, oh, I see my dad. He's a successful guy. He's in poor people's houses, listening to them talk before they die. Wow. Okay. Wow. Now, not everybody has to do that. Okay. I understand that's kind of out on the edge. Not everybody's called to that. But what do you do that shows that you're adding value and you're focused not just on you, but on others? And your kids need to see it. They need to hear it. And then the money isn't a big deal. If you can bring them along and help them to bring those intrinsic values to operationalize them in terms of our giving and our investing. We didn't talk about our investing committee. That's another committee on our board that my kids are learning how do we think about investments as well. So any case, feel free to ask another question.
Well, most families actually avoid talking about money to prevent conflict. I feel like a lot of marriages break down because of the money situation, but yeah, people
I was going
don't
to ask, does avoiding it help?
Yeah. And how do you make those conversations healthy and productive?
Well, you got to practice it. You got to talk about it. When we avoid talking about things, we let them get bigger and bigger and scarier. So here's the thing. I like to have lots of little conversations that are not scary instead of waiting and waiting and waiting. And then we have to have the scary conversation. And so talking about money every day, I'll tell you, my wife, Julie, and I, since before we've had kids, we have had a weekly meeting. I know some people think it's weird. You have a meeting with your wife? Yep. What do you do at your meeting? We review the calendar for the next 7 days in detail. If a kid needs to be driven somewhere, who's doing it? When do I need to get them there? All that stuff. Who's doing soccer practice? Who's doing musicals? Who's doing this and that? So we get it all worked out in advance so we're not surprised on Thursday night that we have kids that need to go somewhere. We also plan the meals. What are we going to eat? I could pull up my calendar right now and tell you what we're going to eat for dinner on Friday and who's cooking it. So we plan the meals. Now that I'm not working quite as intensely, I cook about half of the meals. We also talk about money. Now, we tend to do this more on a quarterly basis now, my wife and me. But when money was tighter, the scarier money is, the more frequently you have to talk about it so that nobody gets blamed and accused and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, when we were early marrieds, we would talk about our money every week. Okay, here's the bills that are coming up. Here's the money we anticipate coming in. Here's the tithe we need to pay. Here's all those things. In my opinion, you've got to have a system to have little conversations that are not scary, to practice all the time.
For entrepreneurs building wealth now, what's the first conversation they should have with their family? The very first conversation if they're doing the wealth building now?
Yeah. So from the family's perspective, the entrepreneur's time is the ultimate scarce resource. So I would encourage entrepreneurs to talk about how much time they work and how much time they're at home. And when they're at home, what should they be doing? Should they be mowing the grass? Should they be cleaning the house? Or should they be hanging out with their spouse or their kids? I would invite entrepreneurs to ask the family for that feedback. When do you want me home? I knew one guy, he was working hard, but his wife said, I need you home at 5:00 on Tuesday and Thursday. No matter what. He left the office at 4:30, so he was home at 5:00 on Tuesday and Thursday. One night was family night. One night his wife wanted to go to the gym or something like that. And so that's what they did. And you know what? Being disciplined about that allowed him the freedom to work the crazy hours the other days. But if it was just unspoken and he just worked whenever and they never knew when he was going to come home, then there'd be all this mistrust and disappointment. And the kids were hoping dad would come home. No, they knew Tuesday and Thursday, man, they got dad. They can watch the shows or they can go out for ice cream or whatever because they would know he was going to be there. So first discussion, I would say, with the family is about your time. Even if you don't have much money yet, it's all equity in the firm or something like that. Your time is the ultimate resource for your family.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Is there anything that I've missed that you want to share with the audience as well?
The thing that I thought would be most important to my kids, probably because it's of interest to me, was investing. And I'm sort of having to pull them along to learn about investing. That's okay. That's cool. They'll learn it over time, but they like giving money away. And so, hey, that's fun. Let's learn together. We're sharing our values and whatnot. Linda, just a couple of stories that I've told today are contained in a book that I've written that people could access if they wanted to. And it's called Thinking for Success. We really believe that all of our outcomes are a result of our actions, which are rooted in our thinking. And so the book is 52 stories that upgrade your thinking to boost productivity, problem solving, and relationships. And it's really designed for leaders to use with their teams. I noticed I was watching this. When I would start to tell a story, Linda, you would kind of go in like this. When we tell a story, it opens this loop in people's brains and they want to know, what happens? If I say a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar, oh my gosh, what were they doing there? We want to know. Yeah. So stories are, I just learned this from a smart guy, that they're cognitively privileged. And so the book is designed to be used by leaders with their teams. You read the story, have a conversation about it, and you can see people's thinking change much more quickly in using stories than if we were just to give a principle.
Yeah, stories are more memorable as well, and we're wired to remember these stories. What does success mean to you personally now that you've achieved a lot of the financial success and it seems like you're working with your family, building a great family with the values, which is lovely. But what does success personally mean to you?
I believe that everybody was created for a purpose. And so success is finding out what your purpose is and working every day to fulfill that purpose. I looked in the dictionary for several dictionary definitions about success, and a lot of them had to do with successful conclusion or the termination of efforts or something like this. And I'm like, you know what? I want to be a successful husband. And I'm not going to wake up one day and say, nailed it, baby. I'm done trying. To me, it really is getting closer and closer to that purpose for which you were made.
You know what? When you were telling me a lot about the stories about your family and, the dinner tables, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is me being completely honest and authentic here, is that I feel like I'm so far behind and I have so much work to do. And our family, I mean, we don't talk at the dinner table as much as we should. And I used to bring my daughter with me to do business runs, and because I own a vending machine company, and I bring her, and she's young and she understands, and I talk about investing. And so, but a lot of the things that you've done, it's really inspiring. And I feel like I have got a lot of work to do. And I know a lot of families that are busy, entrepreneurs that are busy, that they work so hard, but then, like I said, sometimes their family life is suffering as well.
Yeah.
So, what advice can you give for someone that's so, like, just say they have a dysfunctional family? Okay.
Yeah.
Me, for example, just the small steps of where they can start to be able to build strong generational wealth and build a great family around that, and involving your family. Because I got some great advice, and I love the different concepts. I'll be listening to this again, but what's a small step? Because you're at this level super high, and if someone is on the lowest level of wealth accumulation and building generational wealth and helping your kids and to be able to steward that wealth, what's the first piece of advice you'd give on where to start?
Sure. Yeah. I'm always trying to think about what's the next best step. Wherever we are is where we are. So what's the next best step we could take? And so, Linda, since you were transparent there, we'll just take you as an example. Maybe you could ask your daughter or whoever else is in your family, I don't know, and say, hey, what could we do? What's one thing we could do to communicate better or more, even just more? Volume probably precedes quality. I don't know. What do you think? Could we leave our phones, put them in a basket, each tell one thing that happened today in our day? I don't know, but I would just find one thing, and you could ask them, and maybe they have an opinion, or maybe they're like, I don't know, Mom, that's stupid. Yeah, I know it's stupid, but what the heck? Let's give it a shot. So is dysfunction. That's kind of stupid. So let's try this.
Just taking it one
Call
small step.
Call it an experiment. And the nature of experiments is that some of them fail. And so, okay, well, we're just going to experiment with this. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something different. But how about we all have one thing we're going to talk about tonight at dinner?
Powerful. This has been a great conversation. I really found it so valuable. Guys, if you're watching on YouTube and you like all the advice, tell us what resonated with you the most, and hit that like, hit that subscribe button. And also, if you're listening on the podcast, please do me a favor and hit that follow button and leave a review and share it with your friends if you found this episode useful. John, it's been a pleasure. Where can people connect and follow you if they want to know more about your work and also get your book as well?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that opportunity. So thinkingforsuccess.com. So that's Think for Success is the name of the book. And that also takes you to our website. If you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, I'm going to send you a free section of the book. And then it'll give you a link to just a 90-second video on how to use the chapter. You could use it tomorrow at your next staff meeting and see your people's thinking get better every day.
I like it. Powerful. Thank you so much for your time, John.
Oh, it's been a joy.